I want to introduce Judy Baltensperger, who is going to give us a demo of the ES-6 version of the dashboard. It's not necessarily new, hot off the press anymore, but we are operating in our environment in ES-5 right now. So to give you a demo and talk about some of the things that ES-6 provides, I'm going to introduce Judy. Judy's the project manager for the CDM Dashboard effort here at CISA. She oversees the development and implementation of the CDM Dashboard. So welcome, Judy. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon, your busy afternoon, to join us and tell us about ES-6 and whatever other good information you have for us.
Hello, hopefully you can hear me. So where I am going to start is you're going to get to see our sandboxes. So this first sandbox here on the left-hand side, this is actually a representation of our agency dashboard. The reason you know this is the simulated environment is because you can see the various individuals on the dashboard portfolio team and the training team and where they have created their custom spaces. So this is how we familiarize ourselves with the dashboard. And as we're walking through the development cycles, we validate that what we asked to be developed is being developed according to plan. And so towards the end, I'm going to show you what our plan is for this program increment. But what I first wanted to do was show you what does the agency dashboard look like versus the federal dashboard. And so for many of you, we've been enabling cross-cluster search across all of our agencies, and now we have 93 connected. Oh, and I also forgot to introduce, I also have another member of my team here with me today, Harold Alfaro. He's one of the engineers that supports the dashboard team. So if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. He's here to help me. I don't see the chat when I'm sharing my screen, so please feel free to insert the questions there. So what the key element of ES-6 was, and the reason it's the baseline, is because what we're doing is we're retiring the legacy. You can see here the name of the legacy federal and legacy. That's when we were using summary data. So what happened with ES-6 is we baselined something called operational visibility. What we're using is an elastic out-of-the-box capability called cross-cluster search. So as we had enabled cross-cluster search at 93 out of 94 agencies, we're literally waiting on one, and it's the signature on an ISA. So once the ink dries and we're able to do that last connection, we'll have visibility for all of the agencies that currently have assigned MOA participating in CDM. So for your awareness, there's a little over 100 agencies on the gold list, but only 94 of them have signed memorandums of agreement, and they're working with CDM to deploy a solution. So with cross-cluster search, we're able to do something called operational visibility. So what I wanted to show you today is what does it look like once your system, your agency dashboard is on ES-6 baseline, and then what do we see up on the federal dashboard? So let's start with the first tab, and what do you see? And so this is where you got to walk through your dashboard in the lab. And so we still have the basic overview, and we're going to have a navigation along the bottom here where you can see an overview of your environment and your aware score, what system boundaries you have visibility of, and then obviously the key tenets and core foundations of CDM, which are hardware, HWAM, software, SWAM, misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, and then we also have the master user record with users. And so your master device record is going to be a combination of HWAM, hardware, software, misconfigurations, and vulnerabilities. Your master user record is going to be an accumulation of your privileged users, credentialed users, and then any type of information that your agency was able to share with us about trust and behave, which means have you taken your most recent cybersecurity awareness training, and do you have the appropriate entry on duty security clearance to do your job if you're a privileged user. But the general navigation has stayed the same. And this is what you're going to see on your agency dashboard. So when you're navigating to another space, the key ones that you need to keep track of are one, which is directives, which is the point of this class. So you'll click on directives dashboard. And the key element here, because I'm going to jump to the federal dashboard, is they literally look the same. And so that is why with cross-cluster search, if you guys can see the screen here, you'll notice up at the top how many instances we have, number of instances by the various directives. This particular graph here is what it's trying to communicate is the binding operational directive as it relates to system boundaries. So because I'm in the agency dashboard, these are going to be the system boundaries. And granted, I'm in a simulated environment, so we're simulating a lab that thinks it's DHS. So these are the fake system boundaries for our fake DHS agency. Down here, we have our CVIDs, we have instances of software, the various sub-agencies that are part of our agency DHS, and our trend of instances. And then we also have a detailed table down below, which you guys did this in your lab, so that you can go and track a specific vulnerability. So the beauty of the Elastic cross-cluster search is that when I go click on the federal dashboard and I go to operational visibility directives, I, as the CISA analyst, when I'm looking at the dashboard, the only difference is that I'm able to see data across multiple agencies, but it's going to be very similar. So because my simulated environment is only DHS agency, notice how it looks the same. So the only difference that you would see in our production environment is down under tier 0. We have a list of all 93 agencies that are connected, and then our total instance is actually different. But if I knew I was on the phone working an incident like Dave was describing, and I was going to only be talking to you and you happen to be at DHS, then I could go and choose what I want to filter on. So I want to look, say, at the vulnerabilities. So I'm going to select the data view, and then I can go and add the organization filter for tier 0. And I'm going to say is equal to DHS. And then by me filtering my federal dashboard, I will have an exact match for what you're seeing inside your agency dashboard. So that's the level of transparency that we have. And what we're trying to enable is that when you're on the phone with the CISA analyst, we're both looking at the same view. And my hope is that through that transparency, by us using the data and keeping it within your agency dashboard, the data stays at your agency dashboard. So that means that's the authoritative source. We're not replicating and we are not copying the data to the federal dashboard. What we are doing is we're conducting a query that is being sent down through the browser, layer 7 through HTTPS, and it is sending the question that sits behind this panel. So for example, if I want to see the top CVEs, I can go and I can either inspect what that question was, or I can actually go explore it in Discover and I can see the exact saved search. So if I go click on Explore and Discover, and I'm the CISA analyst, knowing that I'm getting ready to call the person on the phone at DHS, then I can see that it's looking at DHS, it's looking at all their directives, and then I can get the detailed data. From here on the left-hand side, I can then pick very specific fields and be very, very specific about what I wanted to talk about. And so what you noticed is I could go from a high-level aggregation summary of where's the worst problem that we want to look at, and then I could drill down into the details, and from here I can be very specific. And there's literally 192 different attributes I could pull up, and I could understand what type of endpoint or category of endpoint is that vulnerability on? Is it on a laptop? Is that laptop part of a system boundary that happens to be a high vulnerability asset, an HVA? And all of those can be added with a push of a button here on the left-hand side. So with that being said, I'm going to jump back to the main directives page. And so back here in the agency dashboard, the ones that you really need to be focusing on for metrics. And so what I'm going to do is kind of show you what all of them look like. And then I'm going to jump over and tell you what we have planned for development coming in the future. So definitely focus on BOD 2201. Probably the most important element of BOD 2201 is what is your asset inventory metric score. So what I'm going to do is show you probably the best place to get reference materials if you are not familiar with how the asset inventory metric is calculated. So the first place I recommend that you go is our knowledge base, which this is accessible to agencies. You just have to submit a ticket and then we whitelist or allow list your IP address so that you can come here and get access to documentation. So inside the documentation, there are the ES-6 baseline, and I strongly encourage you to read the release notes. And then the other thing I strongly encourage you to take a look at is the user guide, which I'm going to click to other tabs and show you what that looks like. That's going to help you find the asset inventory metric. Because we are now deploying content packs, we also have basic documentation on each of those. Many of you are, and I'm not sure which agencies you're from, we've already started deploying 6.01, 2, and 3. 6.03 literally came out like a week ago. We have 6.04 under development, which you'll see in our sprint planning when I show you those pages. But if you want to see actual documentation specific to that content pack, we have release notes, a version description, which tells you what version of Elastic product your dashboard needs to be on. And we also have test documentation and the actual install files. So this is the organization structure for the documentation you need to be looking at. For the release notes, the reason I encourage you to read the release notes is because up at the top, we're going to tell you the most important information that is coming out. So eventually I'm going to go back to the dashboard, but things that you need to start keeping track of is we have added the OMB memorandum for IP version 6 statuses, and I believe that is the M2107. So we have added that visibility into the dashboard, and I'll show you where that is. And then, as all of you know, we're still continuing to track the vulnerability findings. We've added some additional data points for the KEV catalog. As you know, we've added BOD 2301 reporting. You heard that from multiple speakers today. You're very familiar now with the asset inventory metric and how that's calculated, which I'm going to show you the user guide, which explains how that calculation works. But you can see from just these first couple of bullet points what we're focused on, and everything is about not only metrics and ES-6 baseline, but many of the content packs, both those that have recently been deployed and those that are coming in the future. So the idea is that we're trying to get the metric deployed into the dashboard, if I can, 6 months in advance, so that we can start collecting the data from your agency solution through the system integrator. We can start looking at potential data quality discrepancies and or findings and start to resolve those before it becomes a binding operational directive and you're being held accountable for specific reporting. So the goal of the dashboard is to get ahead of the metric reporting, which is why I'm giving you a heads up on where we're going. But in order to get caught up on where you need to be right now, you need to understand your asset inventory metric, which that needs to be at a coverage level of 80%. And you need to be comfortable with BOD 2201 and 2301 reporting, as well as IPv version 6. So I would say that's what you need to be comfortable with right now. If you need additional details above and beyond practicing the labs in this class today, we have a user guide. And what I wanted to do was show you how the AIM score is calculated. So you notice here, we're taking the FISMA self-reported device count. So remember, when you report a number to Cyberscope, we're actually exporting the data from Cyberscope for your asset devices, importing it into the dashboard, and then from there, we're calculating your asset count over a 30-day period, dividing the two. If there were any days that were a 0, and that's because life happens, we know that there were times when system maintenance was happening on your dashboard, and either you were being upgraded to ES-6, you had a content pack that was updated, for some reason the power went out and your server rebooted, whatever the maintenance scenario might be, if there is a 0 over the course of that 3-month period or 30-day calculation, we are not counting that. So that might not be obvious, but that's one of the caveats. And so when you're calculating your score, you need to know who submitted your FSMA number and what does that look like? What is your number inside the agency dashboard? And then we divide those. And so probably the things to note is that we're looking at your dashboard data for the last 30 days. We're looking at your FSMA number for the last 3 quarters, which is 90 days. And then we're dividing the two. You guys can see the calculation of the score there in the screenshot. So with that being said, I am now going to jump back to the agency dashboard. And I think both BOD 2201 is important, and then BOD 2301 is important. And the reason being is with BOD 2301, we are starting to understand how many hosts were seen on your environment within the last 7 days. We're starting to see what kind of vulnerabilities do you have? Were those vulnerability scans completed? These are typically these 2 panels are for the vulnerability scans internal on your environment. Did they have credentials? Did they not have credentials? How many hosts were scanned within the last 14 days? What was the average age of the scan? How many hosts had missing vulnerability scans? What does that trend look like? So we would be asking ourselves with this fake data, why did we have this drop off? We also are looking at vulnerability detection signatures. How current are they across your hosts? How old are they? What's the trend across your environment? What are the current signatures across the different vendor products? There's a table, so you can drill down into that. Every time you see a table, you can actually dive all the way down into the Discover and get a very specific look. And with that, you can be very precise and know the exact host name where this information is coming from, their IP address, their MAC address, etc. Down here below, we have hosts and scans. So we're now collecting all of the device scans off every host. That's what's coming with ES-6, the baseline. And so this is what you see on an agency dashboard. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over and show you what does it look like on the federal dashboard. And it's going to look exactly the same. The only difference is we're going to have a list. We're going to see this for all the agencies. But you notice the host discovery is the same. The vulnerability enumeration is the same. And that's because we're doing a cross-cluster query of your authoritative source data that sits inside your agency dashboard. There's no cloning of data, no copying of data. We're doing a distributed federated search across the network for all the agencies. So that's why it's important for us to always choose the specific agency when we're talking to you on the phone. So some other areas I wanted to point out on your agency dashboard is where metrics are coming. You have the FY23 metrics. So several of the content packs, they made updates to these FSMA metrics. And the first area was enumerating the environment, and you can see the navigation bar along the bottom. So with enumerating the environment, these are going to be your Cyberscope metrics. So we're able to go and collect these metrics from FY23 using CDM data. And we've been doing that for as long as the ES-6 baseline has been in place. And you can look through these metrics. So as we refine and get confidence in these numbers, then those can be automatically reported, just like we've been doing the KEV findings. They can be automated and automatically sent over to Cyberscope. So you can see the type of information up above. You can see the scan percentages over the last 42 days. That's one thing to note. Remember, your AIM score is the last 30 days, but your FY23 metrics are over the last 42 days. So when you're navigating these panes, please look for the details, or what you can do is hover over this little eye and it will tell you how it was calculated. So you can see the a high level summary there. The next item I wanted to point out to you is, remember I told you we're now starting to track the M2107 IPv6. So in your dashboard, you're going to be able to see what percentage of your network is IPv4, dual stack, IPv6, or unknown. And then you have a detailed table down below. The other item that has come with the most recent content pack is actually smart patching. So with smart patching, notice how now we can recognize the mean time to remediate. So we're starting to calculate how long is it taking us as a FSEB, all the agencies, to actually remediate our KEVs. And so remember, this is simulated data that I'm showing you in here. And so the reason I wanted you to note all of these is because I'm going to go click on a blog that was actually posted yesterday by Eric Goldstein. So the KEV catalog is now at 1,000. And so this whole article talks about what does that mean and what have we learned. And so you're going to see in this article some metrics are being shared down below. And so I think you should take a look at this. How many, since last November 2021, how many FSEB agency KEV vulnerabilities have been remediated? Over 12 million. That means 7 million were just in this calendar year alone. Then what kind of percentage increase is that? A 72% decrease? Like, that's how much risk we're reducing in your environments when you're able to patch those known exploited vulnerabilities. And then how long is it taking you to do it? So we're actually able to calculate the mean time to remediate. And these numbers for this particular article were mostly done by hand. But you saw in the dashboard, we have automated all of that. So as all 93, 94 agencies get onto ES-6 and the most current content pack, all of these metrics are going to be automated, and you will be able to see them as well as us on the federal dashboard. For this article to be generated, we on the federal dashboard side had to do a lot of this by hand, but we've automated all of it. Another item to note, oh, here, mean time to remediate. Remember, I told you that. So notice how over the last year, we've noticed it's about 9 days faster and then 36 days faster for the internet facing. So that information is actually coming from the CISA data. So with that being said, what I wanted to do was jump over to what do we plan on working on. So you noticed last week we deployed our ES-6.04 content pack, and this actually is our sprint plan. So you can see we finished that work, and the next thing that we are actually working on, this ES-6.10 patch is actually for our federal dashboard. The next content pack that's coming for the agency is down here at the bottom. So you'll be anticipating a 6.04 content pack before November. And what's planned for that, you can see up here, we are looking at adding MAV data, that's mobile data. We're also making available to the agency dashboard. You can see here, we're doing data feeds from the cyber hygiene data, and we're going to make that visible within the agency dashboard. Here you can see we're going to produce an executive view of the POD 2301. That way, those high-level metrics I told you that were in that blog, we're building an executive view that is going to mirror that. So you're going to be able to see exactly what we're seeing from an executive view. Notice how these two match. And so that's the key to our transparency, is we're trying to make sure that you have the same visibility that we have. The next item is we are looking at improving the end of life metrics with available data. Scrolling down here to agency dashboard, we're also going to make sure that you can drill down to all of the FSMA metrics and that you understand how it was calculated. You can see another couple stories down here on agency data where we're adding how do you visualize high value asset data. So you can see we're building a dashboard to visualize the high value assets, and we're focusing on the first couple of data sets, which are misconfigurations, vulnerability, and software. And then we have another enhancement for this BOD 2301, and then we have HWAM data for high value assets. We have a couple of performance metric enhancements for the FSMA metrics. We're doing those enhancements right there. So this literally is our set of sprints and the work that we are working on. And I showed you a highlight of what work is targeted for the agency dashboard. And in many ways, for several of those, anything involving a metric, we try to make sure that the same dashboard exists on the agency as it does on the federal. And the only user navigation difference on the federal dashboard is us filtering on the specific agency. So the hope is that when we're on the phone, you're seeing exactly what we're seeing. So with that being said, the only other teasers I was going to leave you with is right before I jumped onto this call, I decided to look up what was the most prevalent vulnerability in the actual production environment. And I was surprised. It's actually a Microsoft vulnerability for the remote code execution. This is actually present on a lot of the laptops across several of the agencies. So what I would encourage you as homework, take the lab that you did in this class, and when you get back to your agency, look up and see if you can find this particular vulnerability on your endpoints. It's the most prevalent vulnerability across the FSEB. And so you need to go see, is it actually at your agency? And then find out when is it going to actually be patched. The reason being is because the due date is passed. The goal was to have all of these patched by August 29th. And as you can see, we've slipped a couple of days. So this would be an example of a vulnerability that the fight team and the agency cyber officers would be looking at, because we were hoping to have it patched across all the environment by August 29th. We have some stragglers, and because it is so prevalent across so many of the agencies, it's percolating to the top. It's on the KEV, so there are known exploits. That means the attackers are targeting those endpoints. Another one that I looked up and that I would encourage you to go look as homework on your dashboard, your actual agency dashboard, was what was the most prevalent critical vulnerability, and it happened to be in the Google Chrome browser, and so it is this vulnerability. And in the production data, this was the most prevalent critical vulnerability. So what that tells me is a lot of the agencies have Google Chrome as well as the Microsoft Edge and other browsers on their endpoints that they're provisioning. So they probably have multiple browsers. And what you probably need to do is look to see, is this on your agency network? When is the next patching cycle? And was it being covered? Because it looked like all the Microsoft Edge vulnerabilities got patched, but for some reason the Google didn't happen. And so when we're looking at the trending tables, we can see spikes where the vulnerabilities added to a scanning tool and the Nessus plugin is updated. And then over the next 2 to 3 days, we see the volume of the vulnerabilities increase. And then as the patching windows come up at each of the agencies, we see the trend line come back down. But what we saw with this is there were several agencies where we didn't see anything happen in the month of August. So it's almost as if this patch was missed on the patching cycle. And you can see this vulnerability is from a while ago. So somehow it's being missed. And so what I wanted to do was share with you what we're seeing in the production environment so that you can go take these as homework assignments and practice your lab on your real agency environment. And then when you're meeting with your agency cyber officer from FIGHT, you're not going to be surprised by some of the questions. Because if you could go and start exploring what I was saying with making sure you're comfortable with directives, the FISMA metrics, I would say those are probably the most important places to look first, and then make sure you know your asset inventory metric score. And you can navigate across all of these. And probably the last thing I will disclose is with this version of ES-6, we are on Elasticsearch 8.7.1. And for your awareness, we discovered a bug in that version of Elastic, and it is impacting our trending data. So if your agency is impacted by that because you're on Elastic 8.7.1, for your awareness, we know about that. Elastic has already produced a patch for it and fixed it. We are testing that next version. I believe it is Elastic 8.9.1 or .2. So they've released that to us, Elastic has. We're testing it in our lab. What we discovered in our lab is this navigation menu is not operating as intended. So that's why we haven't made the patch available to you at the agencies yet. Once we fix this navigation bar so that it works with the new Elastic 8.9, then you will be getting a new content pack as well as a patch. So remember here when I said we had a bug, we are working on that patch. And so the first one we're building is for the federal dashboard. If that fixes the problem completely, then we'll be pushing that out to the agencies. And so these two are related. We also are rolling up some other items on the federal dashboard. We're updating our Mandiant API so that we'll get the most current up-to-date cyber threat intel feed data that we've been enriching the vulnerability with. But the bug I was just transparent about and disclosed, I said we're working on it. It's coming with the 6.1 patch. The item that you need to be looking out for is this content pack. And with that content pack will be the visualizations related to the agency dashboard. Because content packs are only spaces, dashboards, visualizations. They're basically Kibana saved objects. They make no other changes to the solution. So that was all the content I was going to share.
Awesome. So much great information as usual. Thank you, Judy. I see somebody asked a question. I don't know if that was on anything you showed or if that was in our...
So can you explain the contractor field? Yes, I can. So Daniel Green. So there is the ability by the system integrator to assign whether or not the facility is contractor owned, contractor operated, whether it's government owned, contractor operated. And so when we have the contractor field, that is something that you are allowed to provide the system integrator, and then they can specify that. The tier 0 organization is always going to be the department. The tier 1 is always going to be the sub-agency, but we also have tiers below that. And those tiers typically are the facilities and or locations. And with those facilities and locations, agencies can choose from a drop down that defines, like I said, government owned, government operated, government owned, contractor operated, and like GoCo, etc. And so that's where we get that enumerated field with a data attribute specifying contractor. Does that make sense? For the next question, Corey, if you want to know what content pack you're on, let me go back to the agency dashboard. So down here on the bottom, we're only giving you the baseline version. So if you want to know what specific content pack you're on, you need to click on spaces. Okay, so I clicked on the space health reporting. Under health reporting, I scrolled down to a panel called installed component versions. And then within that panel, I scrolled down to the component called content pack. And you can see that I'm in the development sandbox, which is our lab. And what's installed that you got to see today was 6.1.0 patch. And this one is in development.
So I think they don't have any questions because you covered it all.
Okay, excellent. So at the end of the day, I hope you go back and log into your agency dashboards and look at those CVEs that I mentioned, because that was me looking at our production data right before I jumped on. And so go see if your agency, that way you can practice your lab in your real environment. And I gave you ones that we can actually see.
Great
So good luck
advice.
hunting.
Great advice. Great presentation. Thank you so much, Judy. Appreciate it.
Take care. Have a nice day.
Likewise.